Mm. My daughter has a habit of humming when she's nervous, little tuneless sounds under her breath, like she's trying to fill the silence before something bad happens. I didn't notice she was doing it until we were already in the car, driving away from my parents' house that afternoon, and I realized I'd been hearing it for the past 20 minutes without registering what it meant. She was 7. She was covered in blue paint, and she was humming. I want to tell this story the right way because I've told it wrong before. I've told it angry, I've told it shaking, I've told it crying in a parking lot on the phone to my best friend at 11 at night, but I've never sat down and told it the way it actually happened, start to finish, so that anyone reading this understands exactly how we got to where we ended up. Because the ending matters. The ending is the part nobody saw coming, least of all my family. My name is not important. What's important is that I'm a mother. I'm 31, and for most of my adult life, I made the mistake of believing that family meant safety. My younger sister, I'll call her Petra, has always been the favorite. I don't say that bitterly anymore. It's just a fact. The way the sky is a fact. She's 8 years younger than me, she's funny in the loud way that fills a room, and our parents have never once in their lives asked her to apologize for anything. I learned that about them early. I learned to work around it. When I was 23, I had my daughter, Blythe. Her father and I didn't last, which is its own story, but Blythe has been mine completely since she was 18 months old. My parents helped when they could, which in practice meant watching her on occasional weekends and reminding me, usually over dinner, that I needed to think about stability. What they meant was they wanted me to remarry. What I heard every time was that being a single mother was something to be embarrassed about. I got over it. I found my footing. By the time this story happens, I had been living in my own place for 4 years, working as a project coordinator for a mid-sized firm, and Blythe was the most interesting person I knew. She liked dinosaurs. She liked making up songs. She liked asking questions that I didn't know the answers to. She was 7 years old and already funnier than most adults I've met. The party was my parents' anniversary. 35 years, which my mother had been referencing in conversation for at least the past 8 months, as though it were a moon landing. She wanted the whole family there, aunts, uncles, cousins, my grandmother who travels from Ohio every year, the neighbors from down the street who've been coming to every family event since I was in middle school. It was going to be at the house, catered, 40-some-odd people in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon in September. I almost didn't go. I want to say that up front. Something in me, not intuition exactly, more like a low-grade tiredness, kept nudging at me the week before. I told myself I was being dramatic. I packed Blythe's overnight bag in case she wanted to stay over with my parents. I bought them a nice gift. I did her hair in 2 braids the way she likes, and I drove us there. Petra was already there when we arrived, which I should have taken as a sign. Petra is chronically late to everything. The fact that she was early meant she'd wanted to be there early, and Petra only wants to be somewhere early when she has a plan. I didn't think about it at the time. I hugged my mother, I hugged my father, I said hello to my grandmother and the aunts and the neighbors, and I let Blythe run off to find the other kids. There were 4 or 5 of them, second cousins mostly, gathered around a craft table my mother had set up near the garden. She'd gotten little activity kits, which was sweet, and there were paints and stickers, and the kind of thin paper that soaks through in 5 minutes. Blythe loves art projects. She went straight to that table. I watched her go, and I thought, she's going to have blue hands for a week. I got myself a drink and went to talk to my grandmother. I want to describe what the party looked like, because I think it matters. It was genuinely nice. My mother had done a good job. There were flowers everywhere. The catering was better than I expected. Someone had made a playlist of songs from the years my parents were married. People were laughing. My uncle was doing his thing where he tells the same 3 stories to whoever will stand still long enough. My grandmother was showing someone pictures on her phone. It looked like a family that loved each other. I was standing by the back fence talking to my aunt when I heard Blythe start crying. Not the whiny crying, not the tired crying, the real kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and doesn't stop. I was moving before I fully processed the sound. I crossed the yard in maybe 10 seconds, and what I saw. I'm going to be honest. There are still moments when it comes back to me at random and my hands just clench. Blythe was standing at the craft table, and she was covered in blue paint, not splashed, drenched. It was in her hair. It was running down her face. It was soaked into her white dress and dripping off the ends of her braids onto the ground. She was standing completely still, arms slightly out, like she didn't know what to do with her own body. Her eyes were squeezed shut and she was crying this horrible, silent, shaking cry. Petra was holding an empty paint container. She was laughing, not giggling, laughing with her whole body bent slightly forward like she'd just seen the funniest thing of her life. 2 or 3 adults who'd been nearby were also laughing, or at least smiling, doing that uncomfortable thing where you're not sure if something is funny or awful, so you go along with the group. My uncle had his hand over his mouth. My mother, standing maybe 6 feet away, was not laughing, but she also was not moving. I went to Blythe first. I crouched down in front of her and took her face in my hands, very carefully, trying to see if the paint had gotten in her eyes. It had. There was paint in the corners of both eyes. She was blinking hard and she was shaking. "Are you okay, baby? Can you open your eyes for me? Look at me." She was trying. Her eyes kept squeezing shut. She managed to open them for a second, and they were red, streaming, and she was looking at me with this expression that I can't fully describe. Not just scared, but confused, like she didn't understand what she'd done to deserve this. I looked up at Petra. I said very quietly, "What did you do?" Petra waved her hand. "Oh my God, it's water-based. It washes out. She started laughing again. You should have seen her face. She didn't even see it coming. I looked at my mother. My mother looked back at me and then she said, "Let's not make a scene. Let's not make a scene." I stood up. I picked Blythe up. She's not small, she's 7, but I picked her up anyway and she buried her face in my shoulder. I said to Petra, "Give me your phone." "What? You were filming it." "You were filming it." "I saw you. Give me your phone." Petra's expression shifted. "I'm not giving you I need to see if you posted it anywhere." "I didn't post it. I was going to. Give me the phone, Petra." She didn't give it to me. She took a step back, which told me everything I needed to know. I looked at the phone in her hand and I thought about my daughter's eyes and the red in them and the shaking. I thought about that video existing somewhere of my child's humiliation posted for strangers. I reached out and I knocked it out of her hand. It landed face down on the stone pavers. The screen cracked. Petra let out a sound like I'd hit her. The yard went quiet. My father appeared. I don't know where he came from, but suddenly he was there in the way he has of materializing during conflict, and he said, Hey, that's enough, you're going to apologize." I stared at him. "To who?" "To your sister. You broke her phone." "Her phone?" I looked down at Blythe, who still had her face pressed against my neck. "Dad, Blythe has paint in her eyes. She needs to be washed off. The paint isn't going to hurt her. You don't know that. You don't know what's in it." My mother appeared on my other side and her voice dropped to that specific hiss she uses when she wants to fight without looking like she's fighting. "You're ruining the party." Those exact words. "You're ruining the party." I looked at her. I had known this woman my entire life, and in that moment I felt something I'd never quite felt before. Not anger, not sadness, but a kind of cold clarity. Like everything that had been blurry for years suddenly came into focus. "I need to take care of my daughter," I said. "She's fine. It's paint. You're causing a scene in front of everyone and upsetting Petra." "Petra is upset. She didn't mean anything by it. She thought it would be funny." "Mom." My voice came out so steady it surprised me. She dumped paint on a 7-year-old's face. For a video. My mother's expression did something complicated. Then she said, "If you want to stay for cake, you're going to need to calm down and let Petra explain herself." I took Blythe inside. I took her to the downstairs bathroom and I ran the sink, and I very carefully rinsed her eyes out, slowly, for a long time, the way I'd seen it described. Pour water from the inner corner, outward, keep going, check for redness. Her eyes were red and irritated and she kept flinching from the water, but she let me do it. When I was done, she looked up at me with her face dripping and her paint-soaked dress, and she said, almost a whisper, "Do they not like me?" I sat down on the edge of the bathtub and I held her for a while without saying anything, because the answer was complicated and she was 7 and I didn't want to lie to her. Eventually I said, "Some people make bad choices. It doesn't say anything about you." Then I dried her face, I took off her ruined dress, I found a spare shirt in my bag, and I called the pediatrician's after-hours line. The nurse asked me what kind of paint, water-based or oil-based, was there prolonged exposure, was there any corneal cloudiness that I could see? I described what I saw. She told me to monitor for the next hour. Keep rinsing if needed, and if the redness and irritation didn't improve or got worse, to go to an urgent care. She said paint in the eyes was considered a chemical exposure regardless of whether it was safe paint, and that if I had any doubt, the ER was always the right call. I wrote down everything she said. I took photos of Blythe's eyes and face. I took photos of the Blythe's eyes and face. I took a photo of the ruined dress. Then I went back outside. The party had resumed. People were talking again, eating. My uncle was back to his stories. Toucher was in a cluster with my parents and 2 aunts, and she was talking in that low, urgent way that means she's telling her version of something. She stopped when she saw me. My father started to speak. I held up one hand. "I talked to a nurse," I said. "Paint in the eyes is a chemical exposure. Blythe needs to be monitored and she may need to be seen by a doctor. I'm going to take her home and watch her for the next hour. If she's not improving, I'm going to urgent care." My father nodded slowly. I thought that was going to be enough. Then my aunt, my father's sister, who I have never had a close relationship with, said, "You know, you could have just used the hose. You're making this into a much bigger deal than it is." I turned to look at her. "She's fine," my aunt said. "Kids are resilient. Petra didn't do it to be mean. She did it as a joke, and it got a little messy. If you make a federal case out of every little thing, your daughter is going to grow up oversensitive." There was a beat of silence. Several people were nodding. I looked at my mother. My mother was looking at the ground. "Okay," I said. I picked up my bag. I took Blythe's hand. I walked to the gate at the side of the house and I opened it. "Wait." That was Petra. "Wait, you don't get to just leave. You broke my phone. Do you know how much that phone costs?" I stopped. I turned around. The whole yard was watching. "Bill me," I said. "Are you serious right now?" "You owe me, Petra." I looked at my sister, at my parents, at the aunts and the neighbors and my grandmother who was standing by the buffet table looking distressed. I took a breath. I need everyone to hear me right now. I'm taking my daughter home. I am going to make sure she's okay. And then I have some things to think about. I didn't say anything else. I walked through the gate, I strapped Blythe into her car seat, and I drove. She hummed the whole way home. Blythe's eyes were better by that evening, less red, no cloudiness, responding normally to light. I kept checking. I kept the nurse's notes. I took photos every 2 hours. By 9 p.m., she was asleep in my bed wearing her favorite pajamas, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, staring at the wall. My phone had 31 messages. My mother, my father, Petra, the aunt, 3 cousins I barely speak to. The general shape of all of them was the same. I had overreacted. I had made a scene. I had ruined their parents' anniversary, and I owed apologies to multiple people. Petra's messages were specifically about her phone. She wanted me to pay for it. She also, it came out in the 4th or 5th message, had gone ahead and posted the video after all. Not on her own page, but she'd sent it to the family group chat with the caption, "Local, someone can take a joke." I looked at the video. I watched my daughter covered in blue paint, standing frozen at a craft table full of other kids who'd all gone quiet. You could see Blythe's face clearly. You could see her realizing what had happened. You could hear Petra laughing. And you could hear in the background multiple adults laughing along. I watched it twice. Then I screenshotted it and saved it. I didn't sleep much that night. What I did instead was think about something that my family had always seemed to forget, or perhaps had never fully processed about our situation. It was information I'd been sitting on for 2 years, and I'd been sitting on it quietly, not because I was waiting for a moment to use it, but because it hadn't seemed relevant. Now it seemed relevant. My parents had been living in their house for 11 years. what almost no one in our family knew, because it had never come up, because they told almost no one, was that 5 years ago, when my father had a serious health scare and they'd nearly had to sell the house, I was the one who'd stepped in. I'd just come into a settlement from a workplace injury. A long, painful process that I don't need to detail here, and rather than watch my parents lose their home, I'd used a significant portion of it to satisfy their remaining mortgage. The house was paid off because of me. The deed had been transferred. My parents knew this. No one else did. I'm not telling this to sound like a hero. I'm telling it because it matters to what happened next. I called my parents the following morning. My father answered. "I think we need to talk," I said. "I agree," he said in the tone that meant he was ready to deliver a lecture. "What you did yesterday, Dad, I need you to listen to me. I need you to actually listen to me. I need you to actually listen, not respond, for about 2 minutes." A pause. "Fine. I took Blythe to urgent care this morning." I had. I decided overnight that the nurse's advice plus my own anxiety added up to a trip worth taking, and the urgent care doctor had flushed her eyes properly and confirmed mild irritant conjunctivitis. Not serious, should resolve on its own. Here's some drops, here's documentation. She has mild chemical irritation in both eyes. I have a medical report. I have photos of her face from yesterday and photos from this morning. I have the video Petra posted. My father said nothing. I also want you to know that I'm not coming to Sunday dinners for a while. I'm not bringing Blythe to family events where Petra will be present. And I think before we have any more conversations about what I owe to anyone in this family, it might be worth reflecting on what this family owes to me. I'm not finished. I had never said that to my father before. The line went so quiet I could hear him breathing. "I love you." "I love Mom." But what happened yesterday was not a prank. Blythe had paint in her eyes, and every adult in that yard, including you, including Mom, prioritized not making a scene over making sure a 7-year-old was okay. That's not something I can just set aside. Silence. I'm going to give everyone some space to think, and I hope that in that time, someone will decide to actually apologize to my daughter. Not to me, to her. She's the one who was standing there covered in paint while the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally laughed. I hung up. I called my lawyer that afternoon. She's a family friend. She's helped me with various things over the years. I explained the situation. She said that depending on how things developed, there were options, and documentation was always good. I told her I had documentation. She said, "Keep it." Then I texted Petra directly and said 2 things. First, I was not paying for her phone. Second, if the video of my daughter was not removed from every platform it had been shared to by the end of the day, I would be consulting further with my attorney about my options. The video came down in 40 minutes. What followed was not dramatic in the way of movies. There was no big confrontation, no screaming match. What there was silence, the specific silence of people who were used to being catered to, suddenly encountering a wall. My mother called 3 times over the following week. The first 2 times were more of the same. I'd hurt Petra's feelings. I'd put a dark cloud over the anniversary. My father had been upset. The 3rd time, something was different in her voice. She sounded quieter. Older. "We should have reacted differently," she said. "Yes, I don't." She stopped. "I don't know why I didn't. When I saw Blythe standing there, I thought that went too far. And then everyone was laughing and your father was there and I went along with it. I know. I'd like to see her. I know. And I want Blythe to have a relationship with you. I do. But she's going to need to hear from you. In your own words, not mine. She asked me that day if you didn't like her. My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Oh God, yeah, I'll call her." "Can I call her?" "I'll let her know you might. She can decide if she wants to talk." That was about 6 weeks after the party. Blythe did talk to my mother. It was a short conversation. She's 7, she doesn't do long phone calls, but at the end of it, Blythe came and found me in the kitchen and said, in that matter-of-fact way she has, "Grandma said sorry. How do you feel about that?" She thought about it. "Okay," she said, and then she went back to her room. Petra has not apologized. I don't expect her to. What she did was send me, 3 weeks after the party, a link to a replacement for her phone, and a note that said, "I got it covered, don't worry about it." Like that closed the loop. Like that was the transaction that needed to be completed. I didn't respond. My father and I had one longer conversation a month or so after everything. He's not a man who apologizes easily. He's of the generation and disposition that treats apology as defeat. But he said something that I think was his version of it. He said, "I should have taken you outside right away and told everyone else to mind their business." I said, "Yes, you should have." He said, "I'll try to do better." I said, "That's all I'm asking." It wasn't everything. It wasn't the full-throated accounting I think my daughter deserved from all of them in a room together. But it was something real, and I've learned to tell the difference. There's something I've turned over a lot in the months since, the way everyone at that party looked at a little girl standing frozen and covered in paint, and their first instinct was to laugh. Not maliciously, most of them, just the herd instinct, the social pressure to go along with the room, to not be the one who breaks the mood. My aunt wasn't wrong that kids are resilient. Blythe is resilient. But resilience isn't something we should be banking on in place of basic decency. You don't get to cause harm and then point to the person's ability to survive as your justification. The thing about Petra is that she knew exactly what she was doing. She had the paint, she had the phone, she had positioned herself for the best angle. This was not spontaneous. She wanted a reaction. She wanted content. She had looked at her 7-year-old niece and thought, this would be funny, this would get views. And she was so certain that the room would back her up, that our family's long-established pattern of laughing off whatever she did would hold, that she'd done it in front of 40 people without a second thought. That certainty is what I keep coming back to, not the act itself, as awful as it was. The certainty that I would absorb it, that I would be upset, and that my upset would be the problem, and that Blythe would be upset, and that her upset would be managed and smoothed over, and that by Sunday dinner everyone would have moved on and I would have learned, again, to take up less space. I did not move on. I did not take up less space. There were practical consequences to all of this that I haven't mentioned yet, and I want to mention them now because they're part of the story, part of why the ending landed the way it did. About 8 weeks after the party, my parents mentioned casually to my mother's sister, who then mentioned it to me, that they were thinking of redoing the kitchen, a significant renovation. They had a contractor coming to give estimates. This information arrived at the same time as a letter from my attorney, who had been quietly doing some research on my behalf. The letter was informational, laying out some facts about the nature of property ownership and what options existed in various scenarios. I read it twice and I set it aside. I didn't use it. I want to be clear about that. I didn't threaten my parents with anything related to the house. I didn't need to. The leverage was never the point. The clarity was. Knowing that I had it was enough to stop me from shrinking, from apologizing for things that weren't my fault, from accepting a version of events where I was the one who had ruined the party. What actually happened when my parents' contractor came to discuss the kitchen renovation was that my mother mentioned to him that the house was paid off, and the contractor said something routine about ownership documentation, and my mother had to go find the deed. And when she found it, I imagine this moment, though I wasn't there for it, she held it in her hands and looked at my name and understood something that she maybe hadn't let herself fully understand before. She called me that evening. "I looked at the deed today," she said. "Okay," I said. I didn't. She stopped, started again. "I think your father and I have been careless." "Yes," I said. "I think so too. That's not..." Another pause. "That's not lost on me, after everything, after how we handled things at the party. I know it's not." We talked for a long time that night. Not about legal arrangements or property or anything transactional. We talked about Blythe and about what my mother wanted her relationship with her granddaughter to look like going forward and what kind of family occasions we could try slowly to rebuild. We talked about Petra and how my parents had, over many years, failed to hold her accountable for anything, and how that failure had in some ways been as unfair to Petra as it had been to me, because nobody had ever required her to be better. And now she was an adult who genuinely didn't understand why her actions had consequences. It was the most honest conversation I'd had with my mother in years, maybe ever. I'm not going to tell you we're back to normal. I don't know what normal looks like anymore. Blythe has seen my parents a few times since then, supervised, with clear expectations, and she seems mostly fine. She's resilient, as my aunt said, and also she's 7 and she lives pretty fully in the present. She asked me once, maybe 2 months after the party, why she didn't have a dad like her friends, and I said some kids have 2 parents and some kids have one really good one, and she thought about it and said, okay, and went back to her song. She hums a lot. I've come to love the sound. Petra and I don't speak. I don't think we will, not for a long time. She sent me a Merry Christmas text in December, which I didn't respond to. I'm not angry exactly, or I'm not only angry, I'm something more like finished. There's a version of sisterhood that requires you to absorb cruelty on a recurring basis and call it complicated love, and I was in that version for 30 years and I'm not in it anymore. What I am is someone who stood in a backyard while the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally told her she was ruining the party and didn't apologize and didn't move on and waited. I waited, and the truth found its own level the way truth tends to. And the ending they never saw coming wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation, no speech, no moment of revelation with everyone watching. It was just a deed with my name on it, and a phone call and a long, honest conversation, and a slow, imperfect reckoning. That was enough. That was more than enough. Blythe's eyes healed completely, by the way. No lasting damage. The doctor gave her the all-clear 3 weeks after the incident, and she celebrated by eating a truly alarming amount of ice cream and then falling asleep on the couch. She didn't ask about the family again for a while. When she did, she just asked if Grandma was going to come visit, and I said I thought so, and she said good. She wanted to show her the dinosaur she'd painted. Blue, this time, on purpose, on paper, and she hummed the whole time she made it. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually costs to keep the peace, not in some abstract way, in the specific, measurable way. The years of swallowing things, the Sunday dinners where I smiled through comments that stung, the times I let myself be the one who overreacted because the alternative was a conflict nobody wanted to have. I was good at it. I'd had a long time to practice. What I've come to understand, slowly and not without some pain, is that keeping the peace isn't neutral. It's a choice, same as any other, and it has consequences that run in both directions. When I kept the peace after Petra's small cruelties over the years, I wasn't preserving harmony. I was teaching everyone around me what I was willing to accept. I was drawing a circle around myself and Blythe, and then handing other people the pen and saying, go ahead, redraw this however you like. The day of my parents' anniversary party, I stopped handing over the pen. It didn't feel powerful in the moment. It felt terrifying and sad and a little like grief, because the thing nobody tells you about finally holding your ground is that it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like loss of the version of your family you always hoped they might become, of the ease of pretending things were fine, of the particular comfort of belonging somewhere even when that belonging costs you. But here's what I've come to believe, and I believe it not because anyone taught it to me, but because I lived my way into it. The people who are never required to answer for their actions don't grow. They calcify. Petra is funny and bright, and she has spent her entire life surrounded by people who laughed when she went too far, who smoothed things over, who handed her back the pen every time. That's not love. That's a slow failure dressed up as kindness, and I had participated in it. That's the part I had to sit with. I wasn't only a victim of the pattern, I'd helped maintain it every time I absorbed something I should have named out loud, every time I drove home quietly instead of saying that wasn't okay. Blythe changed that calculation for me, not because she's more important than I am, but because watching someone treat my child the way they'd always treated me and seeing it clearly for the first time through her eyes made me understand that the pattern was going to keep going until someone interrupted it. It was going to reach her. It was already reaching her. So I interrupted it. What followed? The silence, the pressure, the messages, the slow and imperfect reckoning wasn't karma in any mystical sense. It was just cause and effect. Actions have weight. Choices accumulate. The deed with my name on it had been sitting in a drawer for 2 years, quiet and patient, not because I was waiting to use it, but because the truth has a way of becoming relevant eventually, whether you intend it to or not. I don't think I'm a hero for any of this. I think I'm someone who got tired enough and clear-eyed enough at the same time to do the thing I should have done years earlier. And I think Blythe, who painted a blue dinosaur and hummed while she did it and asked if Grandma was coming to visit, is going to grow up knowing something I learned much later, that the people who love you don't require you to be smaller to make them comfortable. That's the ending. That's the one they didn't see coming. Not because it was dramatic, because it was simply quietly true.